If you have started making changes to reverse your insulin resistance, if you're eating differently, if you've changed your lifestyle, you might be wondering, do I have to eat like this forever? Or can I go back to a normal diet once it's reversed? Insulin resistance is caused by our choices. It is a lifestyle condition, and therefore to reverse it, you need to change what you're eating and doing. Now, I talk a lot on my channel and with my community about making small, manageable changes because depending on the changes you've made, if you've reduced carbs, if you're counting calories, it can feel very overwhelming and like a lot of work and like something you don't necessarily want to do long term. So we're gonna get into it. So we're gonna get into all of that in today's episode. And spoiler alert, I do have some good news for you, but also a little bit of nuance and a little bit of bad news. Now, if you're new here, my name is Kait. I'm a nutritionist. I specialize in insulin resistance and blood sugar control. I have helped hundreds of clients reverse insulin resistance naturally and maintain their results. And so I'm here today to help you. Now, I want to start off by clarifying what it means when people say a normal diet. This is typically referring to, I guess, the standard American diet, which is high in carbohydrates, high in processed food, a lot of burgers, pizza, cereal, that sort of thing. Typically, it is low fat just because a lot of products nowadays are made to be low fat so that we think they're healthy, a little bit of marketing, so we buy them. Although I do think that the mainstream idea of what is healthy is kind of moving away from this low-fat narrative, which is good because fat, it's an essential nutrient. We need to be getting it in our diets. And especially if we have the goal of reversing insulin resistance, of balancing our blood sugar, of losing weight, fat is important for our hormones, for satiety. It's not to be feared. So when we talk about going back to a normal diet, what people mean is going back to eating whatever they want, whenever they want. When we're talking about this, we need to understand that yes, insulin resistance is reversible. It is caused by our diet and lifestyle choices over a long period of time. And if we go back to eating the exact same way we were when we became insulin resistant, then we can redevelop it. We can think about it like this. It's like weight loss. Yes, you can go on a super strict diet. You can drop the weight fast. But if you go immediately back to how you were eating beforehand, you gain the weight back. And we see this all the time with people. When we go back to old habits, then we have returning old issues. So this is good and bad news for people. You're never going to be able to go exactly back to how you were eating beforehand, eating whatever you wanted, whenever you wanted, and not worrying about macros or pairing foods or blood sugar control. You're always going to have some awareness about that. But this is why it's important that the changes you make when you're reversing insulin resistant, they are small and they are manageable. Because if you're able to stick to them, if you are easily able to incorporate them into your daily routine, then that's what's going to lead to results and long-lasting results. Because yes, you might not go back to exactly how you were eating before, but you can tolerate carbohydrates better when your insulin resistance is reversed. And that means you do have a little bit more wiggle room and a lot more food freedom. Because after you reverse insulin resistance, your insulin sensitivity has improved. So what this means is that your cells are responding correctly to insulin. They are taking in glucose as they should. Your blood sugar is remaining stable and at a healthy level. You're not having big spikes and crashes in it. Your blood sugar isn't going to be elevated throughout the day. If you are pre-diabetic or type 2 diabetic, this means that your fasting blood sugar has come back down to a normal range. And yes, when your cells are more sensitive to insulin, this means you can tolerate more carbohydrates and your body will be able to deal with the influx in glucose and take that glucose to the cells in your body that need it, and the cells are going to take it. Also, as your insulin sensitivity improves, your metabolic flexibility also improves. This means that your body is able to switch between using stored fat as energy and the glucose that's coming in, because when you're insulin resistant, your body isn't able to use glucose as it should. It's kind of a wasted fuel source. because your cells are overwhelmed. And that's why a lot of people, when they're insulin resistant, they will eat a big meal and they'll still feel hungry for something sugary afterwards. This is a sign of insulin resistance because your body isn't able to process the energy from that meal efficiently. And your cells, even though the energy is available, your cells are essentially starving. And your body is like, I'm still hungry. I need energy. Give me something quick, give me some sugar, and that's why you have these cravings. So when your insulin resistance improves, then this isn't going to be the case. You'll eat that big meal and your body will be able to use that energy as it should. And this is really empowering to know because it means that no, you're not going to have to stick to a strict diet. Yes, Zeus, what can I do for you? Yes. Can't you see I'm a little busy? Okay, you're just gonna act cute in the background, all right? As I was saying, this should be good news because it means that no, you don't have to stick to a strict diet for the rest of your life in order to maintain your results, but you do have to still be mindful because not being mindful is what got you in this situation in the first place. And this isn't just about the number of carbohydrates you're eating. You can be smart about them in different ways. For instance, by eating carbohydrates around exercise, this allows your body to use that energy immediately when you're exercising, even if it's just going for a walk or something like that. Or if you use carbohydrates in the context of a balanced meal, that's going to make them a little bit more blood sugar and insulin friendly. And just doing little things like this, these little changes and being a little bit more mindful is what's going to allow you to have that freedom with carbohydrates and still remain insulin sensitive and not have issues with your insulin resistance coming back. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about the habit changes that you should be doing long-term in order to remain insulin sensitive and not have insulin resistance come back. As I said, targeting your carbohydrates a bit more strategically, making sure you have them around exercise if you are going to have them, or if you're not exercising, making sure you're not eating carbohydrates naked. So what I mean by naked is eating carbohydrates in isolation, because when you eat something that is almost entirely comprised of carbohydrates, it's broken down rapidly by the body, and this is what causes that big spike in blood sugar, because you don't have anything that's slowing down the digestion of them. Now, of course, simple carbohydrates, things like simple sugars, candy, white bread, that sort of thing, are going to be broken down quicker than complex carbohydrates like sweet potato and other starches, for example. But they are still going to be broken down into the same thing, into sugar, and cause your blood sugar to go up. Now, there are ways to slow down the digestion. One of which is to pair carbohydrates with protein and fat. By doing this, both of these macronutrients are digested slower, and this will cause a more gradual increase in your blood sugar, and then less insulin is needed all at once to deal with that. When your blood sugar doesn't spike up as much, there isn't going to be that huge crash as well, and you're not going to experience cravings and that sort of thing, energy crashes, fatigue, headaches, that come when your blood sugar dips after this. So just having that basic awareness when you're going to eat something, what macronutrients are in this meal or in this snack. If you're having something being a little bit, I guess, naughty, you might say, and having like a bag of chips, for example, trying to add something that has protein or fat beforehand. So this can even look like, if you're having tortilla chips, having it with guacamole. This is going to be a better option than having chips on their own. Now, of course, I'm not recommending this as like a healthy food choice, but we're all going to be in situations where we can't eat 100% perfectly, and that's okay. The goal shouldn't be to be perfect. At the end of the day, what are we trying to get healthy for? We're trying to be healthy so that we can live our best life, so we can enjoy ourselves. And if we are so caught up with having a perfect diet and worrying about every single little thing that we're putting in our mouths, then we're missing the bigger picture, because that can be extremely stressful, and honestly, you're never going to be able to achieve it. And this is why people kind of crash and burn after they do a strict diet, because they kind of have this whiplash. They've been so strict, so regimented, and then as soon as they have one thing that's kind of outside of their diet plan, everything else crumbles. And that's what we want to avoid. And that's why I always say to aim for consistency over perfection. If you're progressing towards your goals and you're getting results, that's what matters. And consistently sticking to the small habit changes over time is what is going to lead to this. Yes, you might get quicker results if you dive straight into a zero carb diet, but if you're not able to stick to that long term, then you're kind of missing the point. So having that awareness about what's on your plate and if you have protein and fat in that meal, that is honestly going to be the biggest thing that's going to make or break your results long term. And this doesn't mean you have to track how much protein is in everything. Just have a little bit of a basic awareness. Know what foods are rich in protein. Obviously meat, seafood, eggs, dairy, all great sources of protein. You can get a little bit from beans and legumes, but I don't recommend relying on them as a protein source because they're actually higher in carbohydrates than they are in protein. And the protein in them is not as bioavailable as the protein that we get from animal products, so you aren't able to use as much of it. So these types of foods can be used to supplement your protein intake, but ideally you want to be getting some source of animal protein in it every meal. And just knowing what foods are a good source of fat, so avocados, olives, ghee, butter, tallow, those sorts of things for cooking, coconut oil, nuts and seeds can be good fat sources that can help to control blood sugar and insulin. Dairy as well, a good full fat Greek yogurt can be fantastic to add in. Just having an understanding of what you can add to a meal rather than take away to make it more blood sugar friendly, because ultimately if you're controlling your blood sugar better, you're controlling your insulin better. Having this awareness is really what's going to matter. And then of course, meal timing. So I know a lot of people when they're working to reverse insulin resistance find a lot of success through intermittent fasting, and this makes sense because if we are not eating for a longer period each day, that's allowing our bodies to be in a low insulin state for longer throughout the day. And it's when we're in this low insulin state that our cells become more insulin sensitive again. So if we can spend more time in this state, then this helps to reverse insulin resistance quicker. But there is obviously a tipping point, because if you are trying to fast for 23 hours every day and only eat within 1 hour, do OMAD or one meal a day. Again, is this going to be sustainable? Is this something that you can stick to? Are you miserable throughout the whole rest of the day? And this comes down to you and just knowing yourself and being honest with yourself, because yes, we all can be super disciplined and stick to something for a period of time if we put our minds to it. But ultimately, we can't do it long term. Yes, hello again. Hello. Intermittent fasting can be great, and it can be as simple as pushing your first meal back a couple of hours so you don't eat, if you normally eat at like 7 a.m., not eating till 8 or 9 a.m. instead, or even a little bit later, depending on what you can handle. Or it can mean eating an earlier dinner. So if you can stop eating at like 4 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., this allows your body to digest your food before you go to bed and spend more time healing, repairing, boosting your insulin sensitivity. So there are different ways to do it, and I've done other podcasts on how to start intermittent fasting and everything you need to know. I will link to one up above and in the description box if you are watching on, if you're listening on Spotify. I am so sorry about my cat, Zeus. What are you doing? Yes, buddy. Can I just finish this? Then I'll come hang out with you, okay? Now you made me lose my train of thought. Where was I? Intermittent fasting. And if you are just starting to intermittent fast, because I think this can be a really, really powerful tool, because it allows you to have a little bit more flexibility within your eating window because you are spending more time not eating throughout the day. It's really important when you aren't eating to make sure you stay hydrated and make sure you are replenishing your electrolytes. And that brings me to the sponsor of today's episode, which is Sodi's Everyday Hydration Salts. This is an electrolyte blend that has been specifically formulated for intermittent fasting, low-carb diets, and for athletes. Most electrolyte supplements on the market do not have anywhere near enough sodium. They've added sugar, they have added artificial sweetener, and they actually break your fast. That is not the case with Sodi. They have zero added sugar, nothing else weird added to them, and they taste delicious, while also being rich in electrolytes. They blow any other brand I've ever used out of the water. And if you have started intermittent fasting and you're getting headaches, if you're finding it difficult to stick to, if you're getting cravings, try adding a packet of Sodi's Everyday Hydration Salts to your water, drink that. Let me tell you, it is a game changer for cravings and headaches and fatigue and energy and all of that stuff when you're intermittent fasting. If you are struggling to stick to a fast that should be pretty manageable, you're not over fasting, then give Sodi a try. You can head to healthcoachkait.com/Sodi electrolytes to check them out. They ship worldwide, and make sure to use code HCK15 at checkout to save 15% off your first order. Thanks Sodi for sponsoring this episode. Now, kind of tying in with intermittent fasting, another thing you can do is to snack less, because essentially this is giving you, micro doses or micro bursts of intermittent fasting throughout your day. It is allowing your blood sugar and your insulin to come back down to baseline in between meals and allowing you a little bit more time to be in that low insulin state and regain insulin sensitivity. I am a huge advocate for eating big meals that have at least 30 grams of protein, a good amount of fat, and are smart about carbs. 2 to 3 meals per day I find is the sweet spot for most people, and not snacking in between. If you are someone who needs to constantly be snacking, that could be the sign of a few different things. It likely means you're not getting enough protein in your meals. So that should be the first thing you look at and address. After that, it could just mean you're not eating enough in general. So that should be the next thing you look at. And if you're eating enough, and if you're eating enough protein specifically, then you're not going to have these cravings in between your meals, and you're not going to feel the need to snack. Now, it could also be some emotional eating or just the habit of snacking. I find that I am a huge snacker when I want to procrastinate, and that is something that I recognize and that I kind of think of every time I'm hungry for a snack. I think, okay, what am I trying to avoid right now? Yep, that's definitely what I'm doing. I'm not actually hungry. I just don't want to do this task at hand. So that could be part of it as well. And that is a little bit more of a mental thing. But honestly, start by addressing your protein and your overall calorie intake at your meals, and that will make a big difference. Okay, so now I want to touch on how to know if you are ready to start maybe incorporating some more carbohydrates back into your diet. If you are at a place where your insulin resistance has reversed enough that you are ready to kind of go back to what is considered normal. We've already touched on how normal isn't really normal, and we don't want to go fully back to how we were eating before. But there are some signs you can watch out for that signify your insulin sensitivity has improved and you're going to be able to tolerate carbohydrates better. The first one is going to be more stable energy and mood throughout the day. So if you are someone who used to always struggle with sort of mid-morning or mid-afternoon energy crashes, if you were someone who always needed to have a nap even though you got sufficient sleep the night before, and this isn't happening anymore, this is a sign that your metabolism is healing and your insulin sensitivity is improved and you're on the right track. There are other physical signs as well. If you have skin tags or dark patches of skin in your armpits, around your neck, in your groin, if these skin patches start to fade or if your skin tags start to shrink, that's another really good indicator that you're on the right track, your insulin sensitivity is improving. Obviously, if you had excess weight to lose and you're losing that weight, and specifically the weight you carry around your midsection, which is caused by insulin resistance, that hard belly fat is actually called visceral fat and is directly related to high insulin levels. So if your waist specifically is shrinking, even if you're not losing weight on the scale, another really good indicator that your insulin sensitivity has improved. Now, you can also look at your lab markers, of course. If you were someone who your insulin resistance had progressed to prediabetes or type 2 diabetes, and now your fasting blood sugar is at a normal level, then that's a really good indicator that your insulin sensitivity has improved. That's obviously going to be a direct indicator. You're going to be able to tolerate carbohydrates better now. Even if you haven't had a recent fasting blood sugar test, but you track your blood sugar at home, either you use a CGM or a blood glucose meter, and you're noticing that your spikes aren't as high and your blood sugar isn't staying elevated for as long, because as your insulin resistance progresses, as we said, your body isn't able to utilize glucose efficiently. So that means if you have a blood sugar spike, it can take a while for it to come back down. If your blood sugar is having a healthy raise and then a healthy sort of gradual decline, that's another really good indicator. You can also get your fasting insulin tested and compare it to your previous fasting insulin. For the most part, the lower the better when it comes to insulin. Below 3 is ideal, but if it's below 5, that's good too. Anything higher signifies that you are still insulin resistant to some degree, but even if it's below 10, you're going to be able to tolerate carbohydrates better than you would have previously. Now, if you aren't really sure how to look at these tests and interpret them, or maybe your doctor won't test your fasting insulin, there is one company that has an at-home insulin resistance test. I have it somewhere here. So Health, they have this at-home kit you can order, and you just do a little finger prick. It tests your fasting insulin, your glucose. It also tests your A1C, your vitamin B12 levels, your thyroid hormone, and a few other key biomarkers of metabolic health. You can do this all at home, you send it back, and within a few days, your results are physician reviewed and you receive a report with the next steps you can take. So that can help you to understand where your insulin resistance is at and if it's improving. Highly recommend this. I'll link to it in the description box down below. I do have a promo code as well. Again, this is only available in the US though. But in summary, can you go back to a normal diet after you've reversed your insulin resistance? Well, yes and no. Yes, you can go back to eating more carbohydrates and tolerating them better, but you're gonna have to accept that, bless you, you're gonna have to accept that you have a new normal. And if you have made the right diet and lifestyle changes and not been too extreme in the process of reversing your insulin resistance, then hopefully it should be a pretty seamless transition. Again, it's important to remember that you don't have to be perfect. You just have to make the right choices as often as you can, and those will add up. Make sure you're having protein-forward meals, make sure you're eating enough fat, make sure you're being smart about your carbs. If you can just be aware of what you're eating and focus on adding things in that are going to make your meal more blood sugar and insulin friendly rather than taking things out, this is what's going to have the biggest impact long term. So yes, after you reverse insulin resistance, you can incorporate more foods into your diet. You can be a little bit more flexible with things, but you just have to be strategic. Anyways, I am going to wrap up this episode here. So thank you guys for watching or listening. Let me know in the comments down below, either on YouTube or Spotify, if you are at a place where you think your insulin resistance has reversed, and if there is any changes you've made, if there's things you've started to incorporate back in, and how you feel eating them now versus when you were insulin resistant. I'm curious to hear from you guys, so leave me a comment down below. And before you go, remember to check out Sodi's Everyday Hydration Salts. I'll put the link in the description box down below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.